Doug in Chandler, Arizona. Hey, Doug. You want to talk about debt?
Hey, Tom.
Hey, Doug.
How are you today?
I am great, but I'll get better. How about you?
In the midst of corruption and greed and Republican hyperbole.
Yeah, there you go.
Happy Friday.
Thank you.
Hey, Tom, I want you to tell me I'm nuts when I get done.
Okay.
We owe about $17 trillion. The Republicans constantly use it as a bludgeon, to get votes. Pushing it to the most, $4 trillion of it is owned by outside countries, right?
Arguably, yeah. I think my understanding was it was more like 3, but
United States.
Say what?
The rest of that $17 trillion is owned by the United States.
Well, a couple trillion of it is owned by the Fed and by U.S. government agencies. Most of the rest of it is owned by people within the United States, institutions within the United States, pension funds, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. What would happen if we just said, okay, we'll wipe all that debt out?
Well, you would be wiping out investors. When the government issues debt, the other people buy that debt for the interest that they get off it. It's the thing that's important to note, Doug, is that government debt is the same thing as private savings. And so you would be, if you wiped out that government debt is necessary, actually. I mean, this is something that Alexander Hamilton pointed out, that people want to be able to invest in something that is safe and not necessarily all flashy and doesn't necessarily produce the best returns, but it's absolutely safe, and government treasuries are that investment. If you were to wipe out that debt, you would destroy the credibility of the United States as a place to invest.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear from you, but you know what people need to understand is China doesn't own that $17 trillion.
No, China owns about $1 trillion of it, or various entities within China own about $1 trillion of it. But and there's really no downside to that. They can't just say, hey, we want our money. It's just it's
an investment.
Yeah, and beyond that, the fact that the government has provided $17 trillion worth of investment grade bonds to people inside and outside the United States is really pretty irrelevant. It doesn't affect our economy. It's as long as there's demand for U.S. bonds, as long as the bond yield rate is fairly low, it's completely irrelevant. And what it means is that we could sell a lot more bonds, and we could use that money. We could go another $1 trillion in debt and use that money to rebuild our infrastructure, and go a second $1 trillion in debt and use that to wipe out all our student loan debt. And make our colleges, our state institutions, at least free, like many of them were free or close to free, back before the Reagan era. And you would see, much like we saw with the GI Bill. The GI Bill cost us whatever it cost us. I don't remember the number off the top of my head. But when we looked at the increase in tax revenues over the lifespan of the people who went to college on the GI Bill, their increased earning, because they were college graduates rather than just high school graduates, the taxes that they paid on that increased earning more than repaid the government for the cost of the GI Bill. We made a profit on the GI Bill. This is why pretty much every government in every developed country in the world provides free college education for its young people, because they know that if they spend $1 trillion on free college education this year, over the course of the next 30 years, they're going to get back $4 or $5 or $6 trillion in extra income taxes. Not to mention the positive benefits to society of having educated innovators and inventors and an improved standard of living in their country.
Good job, Tom.
Okay,
so
thanks.
I shouldn't run out and be scared to death when the Republicans tell me that the debt's going.
The debt is irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. It only becomes relevant when people start questioning the ability of the government to pay it back. That's when you see bond prices start going up, because the government has to offer a higher rate of return in order to attract investors. And that's not going to happen. We could double our debt before that would happen. In fact, I think we would have to more than double it. Japan's debt, for the last 20 years has been more than 200% of GDP, and their bond rates are still very low. People are still buying Japanese bonds. It's not a question of how much debt the government's in. It's a question of how much wealth the government has, and our government has a wealth, has, you know, well over 50 or 60 trillion dollars in assets. So there's just, I mean, and we're, you know, one of the strongest economies on earth. So our government debt is not an issue. If you want to look at debt that is an issue, there are two kinds of debt that actually are possible. In fact, not possible. They are an imminent danger to the United States. The first is the 35 or 40 trillion dollars in private sector debt that exists. That's a bomb waiting to go off, particularly the trillion of it that is student debt. But much of that is corporate debt. What's happening is these corporations are issuing bonds, and then they're using that money to buy other corporations, which is not productive. I mean, Microsoft just bought a phone company, phone manufacturing company, and now they're laying off somewhere between 6,000 and 16,000 employees. That's not, you know, and they leveraged it with debt. That's not an appropriate use of debt, right? That's using debt to increase corporate profits, but it hurts the economy. It hurts workers. I mean, they're laying people off. So number one, you've got this private sector debt that is massive, and it's being used inappropriately. That's what Randy Ray was talking about at the top of the hour. And number two is our trade debt. We, you know, every year between 400 billion and $1 trillion. We buy from other countries more than we sell to other countries, and our trade deficit, that's our annual deficit. Our total trade debt is greater than the $17 trillion. You know, if you aggregate it all the way back to say the 70s or the 60s, when we started going negative on our trade, we had trade surpluses right up through the Reagan administration, and then it started going negative. And you add that all up, and it's greater than $17 trillion. And that's a real problem, because that's money that the country has hemorrhaged, number one. And number two, what that means is that people overseas who are holding these dollars that we gave them because we bought junk from them, or we bought oil from them, or we bought stuff from them, the only place that they can spend those dollars ultimately at the end of the day is in the United States. And so what do? They come over here and they buy real estate, they buy companies, they buy, you know, pretty much anything that's not nailed down, and even a lot of stuff that is nailed down. And so we're seeing America slowly being bought out. Economyincrisis.org, I think, is the website. There's a really good website that just tells this story, and they do a very, very good job of it. It might be economyincrisis.com. It's one or the other. Doug, thanks a lot for the call.